So at this point, you should have watched the video, Why Earth Science, and have a little bit of background of the things that we'll be covering this year. We'll be using the scientific method this year in order to study different things in earth science. So first, we need to learn what the scientific method is and some of the things that we're going to use. So when we go to make an observation, we're having an interaction of our senses with our environment. And at times we can extend our senses by using instruments. Different tools like a beaker or a ruler will help to do that. We know, or we should know, that there are 5 different senses. And those are sight or seeing, hearing. We also have smelling, taste, and the last one is touch. Give a little thought to think about which one would be the most useful for you, or which one may not be useful for you at times. And again, our 5 senses, and you can see a quick little picture on what each of those would look like. So in science, we take a lot of different measurements, and a measurement is a way of expressing our observations in a more precise way. So when we take a measurement, we're adding a numerical value to something, but we also need to have units with that. It's great to say that we're taking a measurement of something, but we want to know the units. If we want to know how far it is from Mr. Levin's classroom to Mrs. Pren's classroom, we don't just say 42. We need to know if it's 42 feet, kilometers, or what it might be. So we learned what an observation is, but an inference is taking it to the next step. So it's an interpretation, or we can form a conclusion based on one's past knowledge, or we could say someone's past experiences. So an example of an observation might be the flame is red, or we could say the candle is white. But if we're making an inference, what we can then say is the flame is hot, if we're just looking at the particular candle within the flame. We wouldn't know it's hot unless we actually put our hand over the flame and felt the heat. But if we're only using sight in that particular case, then we're making an inference. We're drawing on our past experience, because we've probably experienced sometime in our life that fire is hot. One of the things scientists like to do is to classify different things. And we've talked about classification, and you've talked about it in other science classes. So we're using a system that's going to organize our data. And it's going to be done in a meaningful way. And we organize that data based on different characteristics. So in biology, you talked about classifying different animals and other things like that. So in this particular example, we can see that we have classification of rocks. There's 3 different classifications. We have sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic. That's based on characteristics. These characteristics are based on how they formed, whether it's clastic, chemical, biological, intrusive, extrusive, foliated, and non-foliated. So the scientific method overall is the system that is used by scientists in order to solve problems. And that system is the same regardless of the discipline of science, and that method is also used in a variety of different job applications. So the first thing we know is that we have a question or a problem. What are we trying to figure out? We want to have some background information in order to know where we want to start looking at this. The third thing is we need to have some sort of hypothesis to go along with this. We want to have some idea or indication of what we think might happen or be the end result for this particular thing. We then need to design an experiment. When you design an experiment, you need to have a control, and you need to have an independent and dependent variable. And the other one is the dependent. We're going to then collect the data, look at the results, and then we make a conclusion based on what we had. So another way to view that would be this flow chart we have. We can look at the question, which was step 1. We can go to our background information. We have a hypothesis. We test by going through our experiment. We analyze the results and we draw a conclusion. Was our hypothesis correct? If it was, we can report our results. If our hypothesis is false, what we need to do then is go back and rethink what we were doing and come up with maybe a new hypothesis and go back and run the test again. If it's partially true, we might be able to report the results also, but we probably should go back and repeat the experiment. When we write up a conclusion and we are using the Form B write-up that you used last year in Living Environment, we should be able to restate the problem. We want to summarize what we did. That's a summary. It's not writing a word for word, step-by-step procedure and giving every detail. We want to be summarization. We want it to be short and to the point. We want to state what our findings were. We want to compare those findings to what our hypothesis was. And then the last thing we want to do is state any source of error that we may have had during this lab. So error can be anything from human error, that we misread the clock, we did a mathematical calculation, to something that we know that maybe a thermometer broke or something else happened.